Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I still remember the moment like a gunshot in a silent room. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the air. I had asked her a simple question: what did she need in our marriage? What could I do to make things better? She didn't hesitate. She didn't even look at me. She just smirked, picked at her nails, and said she needed a different husband. That was it. No build-up. No pause. Just a blade straight to the chest, delivered like she was asking for another glass of water. My first instinct was to laugh, because surely she didn't mean it. But then she looked up, her eyes flat, her lips pressed tight with that cruel kind of amusement that told me she meant every single word. For a second, my blood roared in my ears. I could feel my body wanting to react, to snap, to demand an explanation. But I didn't give her that satisfaction. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't even blink. I just sat there, still, like the world had frozen. That was when it happened. Something inside me went quiet. Not broken, quiet. There was no pleading, no panic. Just an understanding that this was it. The marriage I had been trying to keep alive wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a stage play where I was the only one who hadn't noticed the audience had already left. And in that silence, I felt something sharper than rage. Clarity. She thought she had won with that one sentence. She thought she had the power. But what she didn't realize was that in that very moment, she gave me mine back. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I stood up, calmly placed my coffee cup in the sink, and walked out of the kitchen. Her eyes followed me, expecting me to come back, to demand answers, to collapse the way she'd rehearsed in her head. But I didn't. I left her with her smug little smirk, unaware that it would be the last time she'd see me play the role of her husband. That night, I lay in bed beside her, the same bed where we had once laughed, whispered, touched like we were inseparable. Now it felt like lying next to a stranger. She turned her back to me, scrolling on her phone, as if the man she'd just dismissed didn't even exist. But I wasn't staring at the ceiling in despair. I was planning. I was dismantling everything in my head, piece by piece, with the precision of a surgeon. My marriage wasn't ending in fire. It was ending in silence. By the next morning, the transformation had already begun. I didn't make her coffee. I didn't kiss her forehead like I always used to. I didn't ask how she slept. I just grabbed my keys, walked out the door, and drove away. Not in anger. In control. She thought I would chase. She thought I would beg. But what she didn't know was that she had just set the stage for something she couldn't stop. The next few days felt like moving through a different universe. She still walked around the house with that same confidence, still scrolling on her phone, still humming to herself as if nothing had changed. But something had. She just hadn't realized it yet. I no longer reached across the void between us. I no longer asked about her day, or whether she wanted dinner, or if she needed anything from the store. I became a shadow in my own home, present but unreachable. At first, she didn't notice. She had built her life around the assumption that I would always be there, orbiting her like a loyal planet. When I stopped spinning, she thought it was temporary, a mood, a phase. But then the silence stretched, and the absence of my small gestures began to creep in. The empty coffee mug on the counter, the untouched space at the table, the mornings when I left before she even woke up. That's when the cracks began to show. One evening, I came home later than usual. She was sitting on the couch in a satin robe I hadn't seen her wear in years. Her hair was curled, her lips glossed, a glass of wine half full beside her. She looked up and said, almost casually, "You're late." I just shrugged and walked into the kitchen. Her eyes followed me, confused, unsettled. When she asked if I was okay, I told her I was better than I had been in a long time. That was the truth. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The following nights, she tried harder. She set the table with candles, cooked dinner from scratch, even reached across to touch my hand. But I let the moment pass as if I hadn't noticed. My silence was louder than any fight we could have had. She had always used distance as a weapon, withholding affection until it suited her. Now she was starting to feel the same emptiness she had forced me to live with. Her attempts grew more desperate. Little texts during the day, "Hope your morning's going okay. Miss you." I didn't ignore them, but I answered with precision. One-word replies, stripped of warmth. Each response was a scalpel, cutting deeper into the illusion that she still held the reins. By the end of that week, She wasn't looking at me with indifference anymore. She was watching me closely, like someone who had lost track of their reflection. And for the first time, I saw it. A flicker of panic in her eyes. She thought she had pushed me too far before, but now she realized she had no idea just how far I was willing to go. I knew the exact moment she began to panic. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like a hairline fracture spreading across glass. She called me at work one afternoon, something she almost never did. Her voice was unnaturally light, almost rehearsed. She said she just wanted to hear my voice. I let the silence stretch, then asked if everything was okay. She gave a nervous laugh and said yes, she just missed me. I didn't say it back. I let her hang in that silence until she excused herself and hung up first. That's when I knew this wasn't affection. It was fear. Fear of losing control. Fear that the distance she had created on her terms was turning into something she couldn't manage. That night, I came home later than usual. She was dressed up like we had dinner plans, though we didn't. She said she'd been wanting to try a new restaurant, that maybe we could talk. I calmly told her I had already eaten. Her face fell, just a fraction, but I saw it. She quickly masked it, suggested maybe tomorrow. I nodded, said, maybe, and walked upstairs without another word. The silence was beginning to eat at her. A few days later, I noticed her rifling through my laundry basket, pretending to fold clothes that didn't need folding. She was checking receipts, looking for proof of something, anything. I didn't call her out. I let her think, let her wonder. Ambiguity became her punishment. She tried again the next night, pouring wine into 2 glasses and setting them on the coffee table. She gave me a hesitant smile and said we hadn't shared a drink in a while. I stared at the glasses, then told her I was heading to bed. She froze, masking the flash of panic with indifference, but her eyes betrayed her. I left her sitting there with 2 untouched glasses of wine, the silence screaming louder than any argument. Her behavior shifted after that. She started texting more often, asking where I was, who I was with. My replies were short, clipped, impossible to interpret. She wasn't used to being ignored. She wasn't used to living in uncertainty. For years, she had thrived on withholding affection, pulling strings like a puppeteer. But now, for the first time, she was the one left in the dark. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had told me she needed a different husband. What she didn't realize was that she had already created one. He was standing in front of her now, silent, detached, and completely untouchable. By the second week, her confidence had thinned into something brittle. She was still trying to pretend nothing was wrong, but I could see the cracks forming in her routine. She lingered near me in the mornings, waiting for me to initiate conversation. She laughed too loudly at her own stories at dinner, desperate for my reaction. But I gave her nothing. A nod, a half-smile, then silence. The kind of silence that made the air between us feel like glass, fragile and sharp. One night, I came home from the gym later than usual. She had set the table with candles, pasta steaming in bowls, wine poured. It looked like a scene from the early years of our marriage. But those years were gone. She tried to mask her anticipation when I sat down. I ate slowly, thanked her when I was done, and walked away without complimenting the food. When she reached across the table to brush her fingers against mine, I pulled back like I hadn't even noticed. The candlelight flickered across her face, exposing the hesitation in her smile. She looked away first. That was when the desperation began to seep through. She started texting during the day more often, asking about my schedule, reminding me of errands, slipping in small phrases about missing me. I replied with cold precision. Thanks. Doesn't matter. All good. Every message stripped of warmth. Every response a reminder that I wasn't hers anymore. Her panic grew quieter, but sharper. She started checking my things, my laundry, my jacket pockets, even my gym bag. I caught her once, pretending to fold shirts that didn't need folding. She froze when I walked in, then forced a smile, saying she was just tidying up. I said nothing, walked past her, and left her drowning in her own suspicions. The more she tried, the colder I became. She stayed up late, waiting for me to come home, dressed in lingerie she hadn't worn in years. But when I walked past her and went straight to bed, I saw her expression falter in the reflection of the hallway mirror. The confidence she had once wielded like a weapon was collapsing under the weight of my silence. And in that moment, I realized something important. She had spent years teaching me how to live without her affection. Now I was finally putting those lessons to use. She wanted a different husband? Wish granted. She just didn't know yet how much that wish would cost her. The silence was no longer just emotional. It began to seep into the practical parts of our life, the parts she had never even noticed I was holding together. For years, I had managed everything. Bills, investments, insurance, taxes. She liked to call herself independent, but the truth was she never even opened a credit card statement unless it was to question a charge I had made. She lived in a comfort built on my effort, convinced it was her birthright. That illusion was about to shatter. It started small. I canceled a few subscriptions, streaming services, beauty boxes, the little extras she enjoyed without ever thinking about who paid for them. The next evening, I heard her sigh from the living room when Netflix refused to load. She waited for me to fix it. I didn't move. She tried again, then muttered under her breath about how annoying it was. I sat in silence, scrolling through my phone, letting the weight of her inconvenience settle. Then I rerouted a portion of my salary into a private account. Clean, discreet, something she would never see coming. Every dollar was a brick in the future I was building without her. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't careless. This wasn't about revenge. It was about preparation. A few days later, she confronted me in the kitchen. She asked why the joint card had been declined at a store. I rinsed my coffee mug and told her I'd look into it. My tone was calm, detached, impossible to challenge. She narrowed her eyes, searching for an opening, but I gave her nothing. She left the room with frustration written all over her face, and I knew she was starting to feel the ground shift beneath her. Her desperation grew sharper. She hovered more. She asked more questions. She made comments about how distant I seemed. Each word was a quiet admission that the balance of power had flipped. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure where she stood with me, and that uncertainty was eating her alive. Meanwhile, I began investing in myself again. I hit the gym harder, bought new clothes, started reconnecting with people I hadn't spoken to in years. She noticed. She asked who I was with, what I was doing, why I was always out. I kept my answers vague, almost casual. Just people. The ambiguity cut deeper than any confession could have. She wanted a different husband. She was getting one, but not the version she had imagined. Broken, begging, desperate for her attention. No, this husband was silent, untouchable, already living in a world where she no longer existed. By the third week, her mask had started to slip. The little performances she put on, lipstick before I came home, candles at the table, satin robes she hadn't worn in years, were starting to look less like confidence and more like desperation. She was chasing something she couldn't name, trying to grab onto a man who was no longer there. One night, I came home late, sweat still on my shirt from the gym. She was waiting in the living room, the television muted, 2 glasses of wine already poured. She smiled too quickly, like she'd been practicing in the mirror. She asked if I wanted to sit, if I wanted to talk. I glanced at the glasses, nodded once, and walked upstairs without touching them. I heard the silence she sat in after that. It was heavy, suffocating. For the first time, I knew she felt the emptiness she had forced me to live with for years. Her questions became sharper after that. Where was I? Who was I with? Why was I always gone? I answered calmly, but never fully. Out. With people. The vagueness was deliberate, and it ate at her more than any lie could have. I saw her searching my face for clues, scanning my clothes for traces of something she feared but couldn't confirm. She wanted me to snap, to break character, to fight. But there was no fight left in me. Only silence. She began hovering near my things, folding shirts that didn't need folding, organizing drawers I hadn't asked her to touch. I let her. I wanted her to see nothing, to feel the weight of the unknown pressing against her chest. She had built her control on certainty, on the assumption that I would always be predictable. Now the unpredictability was hers to carry. The nights became harder for her. I could hear her shifting in bed, sighing, scrolling through her phone in the dark while I lay motionless beside her. Sometimes she would brush against me by accident, then linger a second too long, as if waiting for me to reach back. I never did. She had taught me to live without her touch. Now she was tasting that same medicine. What she didn't realize was that this wasn't a game anymore. This wasn't about punishment or revenge. It was about closure. Quiet, deliberate closure. She had wished for a different husband, and now she had one. One who could lie next to her in silence, utterly unmoved, already gone in every way that mattered. The house that once felt like a cage started to feel like a waiting room. Every room carried the ghost of who we used to be, but I no longer lingered in any of them. I began leaving earlier in the mornings, sitting in my car with a coffee long before work demanded me. The silence of the driveway felt freer than the silence of our kitchen. I stopped rushing home in the evenings, too. Sometimes I'd stay late at the gym. Other times I'd just drive aimlessly, windows down, breathing air that didn't smell like her perfume or her disinterest. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She tried to cover it with questions, casual at first, then sharper. She asked why I was never around, why I didn't eat at home anymore, why I seemed different. I gave her answers that weren't really answers. Busy. Just needed some space. The vagueness rattled her. She was used to being the one who withheld, the one who created distance. Now she was on the receiving end, and it unsettled her more than she could admit. One evening, I came home to find her waiting in the living room, arms folded, eyes narrowed. She asked directly if there was someone else. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of the irony. For years she had given me less and less, making me feel invisible. And now, the idea that I might actually be seen by someone else terrified her. I told her nothing, just walked past, calm and silent. That silence was heavier than any confession could have been. What she didn't know was that I had already begun creating physical distance in ways she couldn't see. A storage unit rented under my name. A new set of keys for an apartment downtown. Documents sorted, files copied, essentials slowly disappearing from the house. Piece by piece, I was dismantling the life we shared, not with drama, not with shouting, but with surgical precision. At night, she lingered closer to me in bed. Sometimes I felt her hand hover near mine, waiting for contact that never came. I could hear her breathing change, shallow and restless. She was the one losing sleep now. I lay still, eyes open, already living somewhere else in my mind. She thought she was testing my love. What she didn't realize was that I had already stopped taking the test. And soon, the results would be in front of her, undeniable. By the fourth week, my silence had grown beyond our walls. I stopped covering for her with friends and family. For years, I had smoothed over her absences, explained away her coldness, made excuses when she couldn't be bothered to show up. Now, when people asked why we hadn't been around, I told them the truth, but not in anger. Calmly, casually, like it was just a matter of fact. Her sister called one evening after seeing me alone at a bar downtown. She asked if everything was all right. I told her it was, that sometimes people change, and sometimes you just stop recognizing the person you married. I didn't accuse. I didn't vent. I simply let the words sit. Her silence on the other end told me she understood more than she admitted. At a family dinner, I went alone. When someone asked where she was, I said she had other priorities these days. The room went quiet. I didn't elaborate. I didn't have to. The seed was planted, and I knew it would grow on its own. Back at home, she started noticing the shift. Her phone lit up with calls from her sister, from mutual friends, even from her mother. I watched her scramble to control the narrative, telling them everything was fine, that I was just going through a phase. But the truth had already slipped into the open. And unlike her excuses, my silence carried weight. People believed me, not her. Her frustration grew. She accused me of making her look bad, of sabotaging her relationships. I only shrugged, telling her I hadn't said anything untrue. That drove her mad, because deep down she knew I was right. The empire she had built on image was crumbling, and I hadn't lifted a finger. Meanwhile, I kept moving forward. More nights away, more time invested in myself, more distance carved into the foundation of our life. She began to hover closer in public now, trying to hold my hand, trying to appear united. But the gestures were empty, too late. I didn't push her away, but I didn't return them either. To anyone watching, the absence was obvious. She had asked for a different husband, and in the eyes of the world, she now had one. Detached, untouchable, and no longer protecting her from the fallout of her own choices. The house no longer felt like mine, and that was fine, because I had already built another life in silence. Clothes had disappeared from the closet, one box at a time. Important documents, valuables, even small things she wouldn't notice were already gone. I had left only the shell of myself, a ghost moving through her space, while my real self waited elsewhere. She tried harder than ever to pull me back. She cooked more, dressed up more, even slipped apologies into casual conversations, but they landed flat. They weren't real apologies, they were bargaining chips. She wanted to reset the board without acknowledging the damage. But I wasn't interested in her deals anymore. One evening, she confronted me directly. Her voice was sharp, almost trembling, as she asked what I wanted from her. I looked at her calmly and told her nothing. That word hung in the air heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Because it was true, I wanted nothing. Not affection, not answers, not her. She blinked, tried to push again, asked if we could fix this. I stayed silent. And in that silence, I watched her face collapse into something I hadn't seen before, fear. The next morning, I left earlier than usual, carrying the last of what I needed in the trunk of my car. She didn't notice. She was still asleep, curled on her side of the bed, clutching her phone like it could save her. I glanced at her one last time and realized I felt nothing. No hate, no love, not even pity. Just emptiness, clean and cold. By that evening, the locks on the new apartment clicked shut behind me. My own place, my own air. No tension, no performance, no waiting for affection that never came. Just silence, the kind I chose for myself. Back at the old house, she texted me repeatedly. First casual, then sharp, then frantic. She wanted to know where I was, why I wasn't answering, if I was coming home. I didn't respond. Every message she sent only proved what I already knew. She didn't miss me, she missed control. That night, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, a glass in hand, watching the city lights flicker. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about myself, my future, the life that was finally mine again. She had wished for a different husband, and I had granted that wish by erasing the old one completely. Her silence didn't last long. After the first flood of unanswered texts, she began calling, her name lighting up my phone at all hours of the night. Sometimes she left voicemails, her voice shaking, sometimes sharp with anger, sometimes soft with desperation. She wanted to know where I was, when I was coming back, if I was willing to talk. I never answered. Every missed call was another reminder that I had finally broken free. A week later, she showed up at my new place. I knew she would. Her pride couldn't tolerate the uncertainty. She knocked hard, then softer, then called my name through the door. I stood still in the living room, listening. Her voice cracked as she said she just wanted to talk, that she missed me, that she was willing to work on things. For a moment, the weight of 11 years pressed against my chest. But then I remembered her smirk at the kitchen table, the cold words she had thrown at me like a knife. A different husband. That memory turned the weight into steel. I didn't open the door. Eventually, her knocks faded into silence. I watched from the window as she walked back to her car, wiping at her face, her shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before. She wasn't walking like someone who had power anymore. She was walking like someone who had finally lost it. Over the next days, I heard through mutual friends that she was telling her own version of the story, painting herself as the abandoned wife. But the cracks showed. People had seen the shift in me long before they noticed hers. They knew the truth without me having to say a word. My silence had spoken louder than any defense could. In the new apartment, I built routines that belonged only to me. Mornings at the gym, evenings on the balcony, weekends rediscovering hobbies I had buried for years. The more I filled my life with myself, the less space there was for her ghost. She had wanted freedom, and I had given it to her, just not in the way she expected. One evening, as I watched the city lights flicker against the glass, I realized I didn't hate her. Hate meant attachment, and I had none left. All I felt was distance. Final, clean distance. She had wished for a different husband, and I had granted that wish in the only way that truly mattered, by disappearing from her world completely. I didn't vanish. I simply stopped being hers. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.